My name is Mark Reynolds. I'm 47, divorced, no kids. I work for a large electronics corporation that supplies toys to the Pentagon. My job used to force me to live in airplanes and hotels, and to be honest, that's what killed my marriage. My ex and I weren't exactly a perfect couple, but her accidental slip-up ended it all. That's how I found out about the affair. It was the end. No options. But let me rewind a little so you understand the context. I've been in the military for 6 years. I was a radar repair technician. Guys like me usually have 2 nicknames. Either Radar, like that guy from MASH, or Sparky. I had a reputation for seeing the damage where others saw only a pile of junk. After I got out of the military, I didn't look for work. The work looked for me. Instead of Uncle Sam, private contractors were paying. I returned to my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and soon signed on to an interesting project. We were developing a control system for drones. The plan was ambitious: to modernize the old models, shed 17 pounds of excess weight, and dramatically improve their vision. My job was to drive these prototypes headlong. The company had rented an old racetrack in the north of the county, a huge enclosed area where you could work without too many eyes. That's where I met her. She was part of the support team. When I first saw her, I literally went numb. As our British colleagues say, I was gobsmacked. Short, about 5'5", she said, delicate, with eyes that seemed to scan your soul. Her jet-black hair was always tied back in a ponytail, even when she was trying to look formal. I was hooked. Since we were both outside management, there were no restrictions on office romances. But when I first asked Jess out, she politely declined, saying she was already seeing someone, even though things were heading toward a breakup. "I'll let you know," she promised. Meanwhile, things were going well at the company. We got access to decommissioned Predators for testing. When I was offered a full-time position, I made it a condition. Jess had to be in my group, and I wouldn't sign any non-fraternization agreements. I told HR, "I've been courting her before, so don't pretend this is a surprise." Surprisingly, they caved. We flew to White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico to show off the product to all branches of the military, from the Marines to the Coast Guard. Jess was there. By then, we had gone on a few real dates, dances, theater, hiking. But there was still a distance between us. Nothing physical. The demonstration went perfectly, but the big guys turned up their noses and said no. We decided it was a failure. On the way back to Michigan, I was sitting in the airplane seat, feeling like a complete failure, and that's when Jess decided it was time to cheer me up. We talked for almost the entire 5 hours of the flight. And then, when the landing gear had already touched the runway, Jess suddenly stunned me with a question. Do I want to be her one and only? It was like a bolt from the blue. Before that, she had kept her distance. Even on joint hikes, we slept in different tents, limiting ourselves to friendly conversations. I replied that I would be in 7th heaven with happiness if we became a couple. However, as an honest guy, I warned, the project was on the verge of closure, and I could fly out of work at any moment. She only shrugged her shoulders. Then money did not worry her at all. Soon fate threw me a gift. The company not only left me, but also offered me a long-term contract as a chief test inspector. Feeling the ground under my feet, I made an offer. We got married in my old church. My parents and brother were no longer alive, so her family and our mutual friends from work were there. We spent our honeymoon Spartanly, 2 weeks on the Appalachian Trail. We returned to Grand Rapids exhausted, dirty as hell, but incredibly happy. However, reality quickly brought us to our senses. Work on large drones was suspended, the team was disbanded, and Jess was transferred to another department. I was thrown into a new headache, the development of a miniature drone the size of a robin. It required a lot of nerves and endless overtime. Jess was not delighted. Our intimate life, which had initially been a storm, turned into a calm routine, 3 or 4 times a week. It suited both of us. At least, it seemed to me. A year later, things went up again. We took a large contract for the Coast Guard and Border Patrol. I was tearing myself apart, working my way to the edge of burnout. It was then, in our 2nd year of marriage, that Jess decided to leave the company. She had taken a job as a personal assistant to a vice president at a local firm. When I met her new boss, something inside me went cold. I couldn't explain it to her or to myself. It was just the intuition of a technician hearing a false sound in an engine. I frankly didn't like him. The stress began to eat away at our marriage from the inside. Jess wanted me to enjoy her career and spend more time at home, but I was perpetually tired and irritable. I would snap at her a few times over trivial matters, and then I would move to live in the spare bedroom for a while. Eventually, I kicked out my assistants at work and stopped living in the office. Things started to improve. I apologized profusely for my behavior, and Jess seemed to accept it. She was beaming with happiness, thinking that now everything would be as before. I thought so too, but I didn't know yet that the mechanism of destruction had already been launched. The next few years were relatively peaceful. The Robin microdrone project was a hit. It was being snapped up by everyone, from the local police to federal agencies, with acronyms that are better not to say out loud. I got a promotion, a solid salary, stocks, and bonuses. But there was one problem. I noticed that the money in Jess's hands was melting like snow in spring. She was spending it at the speed of light. So I decided to play it safe. I opened a separate account at another bank in my name, where I transferred all bonuses and dividends. I rented a subscription box for banknotes and even convinced Jess to file separate tax returns. The official version for her was, "This is how we save on taxes." In reality, I began to build my financial bunker. Business trips began to spoil our blood again. Jess got angry when I missed her corporate parties because of work. This cold front dragged on for a year, until my boss forced me to take a month off work to keep me from going completely off the rails. The timing was perfect. It was our wedding anniversary. Jess had agreed to go on a 3-day hike in the woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. But in the week before we left, I started to notice things I'd previously ignored. Jess had started dressing too risquély and revealingly for work. Her boss, Greg, would call her in the evenings. She would lock herself in her bedroom and whisper to him for hours. Our sex had become mechanical, without any spark, and more often than not, it simply didn't exist. When I tried to talk about it, she would make a huge fuss. I slept on a fold-out bed the last few nights before the trip. That's when I decided, enough. When it came time to pack, I made a move. Instead of our big tent and double sleeping bag, I packed 2 separate single-person survival tents in the trunk. Jess didn't even look at what I was packing. We left Grand Rapids around noon. We had a 6-hour drive ahead of us. We crossed the mighty Mac, the Mackinac Bridge, and stopped for the night in St. Ignace around 4. There were hardly any rooms available, so we got a room with 2 single beds. Dinner was in complete silence. At the hotel, I simply showered and lay down on my bed. Jess, clearly looking for another reason to argue, exploded. "And what will it be like at camp? We'll sleep separately too?" "I've taken care of everything," I snapped. She turned off the light and I could hear her quietly sobbing. Before, I would have rushed to comfort her, but now there was only a cold emptiness and disappointment inside me. The next morning we drove to the campsite for 2 hours in total silence. When we finally arrived and started to unload, I simply handed her her personal tent and sleeping bag, and then she finally took off. "What right do you have to treat me like this?" Jess shouted, looking at the separate tent. I was not left in debt. My voice was calm, but sharp as a scalpel. "The same right you used to kick me out of our bed. Have you ever wondered how I feel? You've become someone I hate to be around. When we get back, you'll be sleeping on the cot." Jess turned away, her face red with shame or anger. She muttered something under her breath. It was quiet, but in the silence of the forest, the words sounded like a shot to the head. That's it. The world has stopped. I didn't scream. I just started acting. Silently, I grabbed my things, threw them into the trunk, and practically shoved Jess into the front seat. I started the engine and sped away so that gravel flew from under the wheels. "Where are we going?" she asked, stunned by my reaction. "As soon as you get a connection, you call your precious Greg. Have him wait for us in the Cadillac. You're going to him. You're not going to the apartment I'm paying for again. I'm going to the lawyer on Monday, and you'll pick up your belongings next week. I understand Greg likes it when you're in his bed." She sobbed. "Oh my God. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have heard that." "But I heard it." I slammed the steering wheel. "And now everything is clear. How many times have you been in his bed? Do you even realize that you've blown it? I've never, ever cheated on you. On business trips, women have come to me, tried to get me drunk, invited me to theirs. But, unlike you, I remembered what I promised at the altar. For me, vows are not empty words." I couldn't stop. The questions poured out of me like hot coals. Did you even have the brains to protect yourself? Should I get tested for STDs now? Did you give me malnutrition after him? How long has it been? 8 months? A year? Maybe there were other guys I didn't know about? Jess squirmed in her chair, trying to make herself invisible. Tears smeared her mascara. She stared out the window at the flickering trees. Finally, she spoke through her breathless voice. "I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't mean for this to happen. When you skipped corporate events, Greg was there. He said if he was my husband, he would never be so distant. I fell for it. It's been 8 months. He's the only one, I swear. We were going to end this. I was hoping this trip would help us get back what we lost." I interrupted her with a bitter laugh. "Get back what you lost? Is that why you kicked me out of my own bedroom this week? Is that your way of stirring up passion?" She fell silent again. We drove the rest of the way to St. Ignace in dead silence. When we reached town, I pulled out my phone, put it on speakerphone, and placed it in front of her. "Call Greg. Tell him we're coming. If he doesn't pick you up himself, I'll drop you off right outside his door. I think his wife will be delighted with such a surprise." "Let your Greg look around," I said over my shoulder as we sped down the highway. "I'm not going to get my hands dirty with him, but I'm sure there are other men in your office who will want to talk to him when they find out what he does at work. You're not the only one he's been having fun with." Jess dialed the number with trembling fingers. A woman picked up the phone. Greg's wife. I didn't let Jess say a word and took the initiative. "This is Mark Reynolds. I need to talk to your husband about his affair with my wife. If he doesn't come, I'll be on your doorstep in a few hours and personally drop his mistress off at your door." There was a sob on the other end, and then an ear-piercing scream. "Greg, get your filthy ass in here. Talk to this man. I've already started packing your things." Greg finally picked up the phone. I nodded to Jess. "Speak." She began to stammer. Greg, Mark knows everything. He says you have to come to the Cadillac and pick me up, or he'll drive me straight to your house." Greg, the real man, instantly showed his true colors. "No way in the world. Don't even think about showing up at my—" I interrupted him. "Oh, you'll come, Greg, because if you don't, I'll be sitting under your human resources department with a report about an inappropriate relationship between a manager and a subordinate. We're almost to the straight, so get moving." Greg tried to snap, saying I had no evidence. "Maybe," I replied, "but you can't just dismiss a sexual harassment lawsuit and the scandal I'm going to cause. Myers parking lot on Boone Road in 2 hours. If you're not there, your wife will hear the whole story from my wife in detail. Your choice?" Greg started screaming, not at me, but at Jess. "You dirty traitor! You ruined my marriage!" "It takes two to tango, Greg," I said, "and something tells me there are complaints from other women in your personnel file already." I could almost hear him blowing up on the other end of the line. "Okay, son of a bitch, I'll be there." As we pulled up to the Cadillac, Jess began to beg. She was crying, promising anything to let me stay in the apartment. It only made me angrier. "You know what, Jess? If you really cared about me, you would have supported me instead of seeking solace in someone else's bed. I worked hard at my job to give you a decent life. I wasn't going to quit for a lower salary just because you were bored. You ruined everything we had. You ruined Greg's marriage. Are you finally realizing what you've done?" She sobbed loudly the rest of the way, and I stayed silent. When we pulled into the parking lot, Greg was already waiting in the car. He looked like a beaten dog. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not a drop. Jess tried to grab my hand one last time. "Take it off," I said coldly. "What?" she whispered. "The engagement ring and the wedding ring. Take it off. Now." She started to cry, but all I could feel was a deep, empty sadness. I made her give up the gold, opened the door, and pointed to Greg's car. "This is your new home. Have a good life." I turned around and drove away without even looking in the rearview mirror. I was truly free now, even though that freedom had the bitter taste of ashes. As soon as the door closed, I took off. There were 110 miles of lonely road ahead of me to Grand Rapids. It felt like my life had ended right there in the parking lot. I was driving on autopilot, lost in my own darkness, when suddenly Greg's car came barreling past me at breakneck speed. Jess must have told him it was me. He turned onto the 17th mile marker, and I thought that was it. I was wrong. A few minutes later, out of nowhere, a powerful impact on the rear bumper jolted my car. I lost control. According to the police report, my car flipped 4 times before coming to rest in the middle of the median. Darkness. I was evacuated by helicopter. I was lucky. I only had a severe concussion and burns from the seatbelts and airbags. When the cops showed up at the hospital the next day, they already knew everything. It turned out that Jess had told them the truth about Greg. He had pulled off the highway just to let me pass, then catch up with me and ram me. But karma is a tricky thing. Something fell off my car and jammed Greg's steering wheel. He couldn't get away. He was booked with the full package: dangerous driving, speeding, endangering life, and fleeing the scene of an accident with victims. His wife refused to post bail. Jess didn't even have money for a taxi, so a police officer drove her to the apartment. When I was discharged 2 days later, No one met me. I hailed a taxi and went home. The apartment greeted me with silence. Jess had packed all her things. On the kitchen table were her phone, apartment keys, car keys, and a note. "Mark, I am ashamed of what I have done to our marriage. I know that words cannot heal the pain. I'm going to my parents. If you decide to file for divorce, I won't fight. I don't want anything more than what I've already taken. I still love you, even though you probably don't feel anything but hatred for me. Jessica." I didn't hesitate. I found a lawyer and filed not only for divorce, but also a lawsuit against their company for ignoring their ethics policy. Greg became a defendant in both the divorce case and a personal lawsuit for assault. The result was devastating. I got 5 years, 3 of them suspended if he takes anger management classes and an anti-sexual harassment program, and 10 years of probation. Both of us lost our jobs. To hush up the case, she paid me a huge compensation. I filed for divorce that same week. But the final chord was not played by the law. Before Greg could even go to jail, another angry man, whose wife he had also counseled, decided not to wait for a trial and taught him a lesson in his own way in a dark alley. I rarely travel these days. I train newbies, I conduct on-site tests. I got another promotion, but most importantly, I got peace of mind. Sometimes I look at those 2 rings in the desk drawer and think about how one radar was able to see the betrayal before it completely destroyed him.